for the wisdom of those that came before to put in lakes that we could have water at these times, and just makes us remember what things must have been like one of those days in the good old days. But we realize that the good old days aren't always good, and today is not as bad as it could be. So thank you for loving us. Continue to guide us, guide these deliberations. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, we call the meeting to order. We have several public comments for later in the meeting, but is there anyone else who wishes to address the council on any matter at this time not related to agenda items? Okay, seeing none, I'll make one. I just want to say thank you publicly again to all the city staff, everyone involved in the 4th of July celebration. I know our city staff put in lots of extra hours and lots of warm Texas summertime, and we do appreciate it. I think everything went extremely well. Heard nothing but positive comments for everything except for the heat, and we really couldn't do much about that. And obviously the Chamber of Commerce did a great job from their perspective as well. Item number 3 is to consider the minutes of the June 28, 2022 City Council meeting.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the minutes as presented.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
We're gonna do the consent agenda.
Oh, we did. I'll second it.
We're going to do them separately. John.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is to consider an ordinance abandoning a portion of the sanitary sewer easement at 3080 Pecan Meadows and authorizing the city manager to execute an encroachment indemnity agreement. Mr. Van Til.
Mayor, council members, appreciate you being able to represent this item to you. It's popping up on the screen here shortly. There we go. This item revolves around an encroachment into a sanitary sewer easement that is located at 3080 Pecan Meadow. There's a picture of it with the red circle around it. That's where the lot is. And we're going to drill down into some specifics. There's a picture of it. The house is under, when it was under construction, currently its house is pretty much done. As a matter of fact, I think it is done. The red box indicates the easement there, and the yellow line is the 15-inch sanitary sewer line that runs across the site. On the edge there, this is a picture of the site plan that was approved prior to construction, as you can see with the indication of the red line there right outside the what is now a little less green line indicating the sanitary sewer easement. Just want to make sure that you understood that prior to construction, all the documents were in order. After construction, when it was ready to close, the surveyor, or I guess the title company, the closing company, discovered that the house encroaches into the easement about 46 square feet as indicated inside the red circle and the yellow area that is highlighted there. So after all that, we recommend that the city council authorize our city manager to sign the encroachment indemnity. And if you have any questions, of course, I'm here to answer those.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, so being in this industry for construction up to the point when concrete's laid, we've run into this a couple times. There's certain builders that always require a form check once forms are in place before plumbing, before concrete, obviously. That I think concrete being in place is obviously the issue here. I'm not making a motion for denying this or for any reason other, but more concerned about just the future if this has happened a little more frequently. There's plenty of planning involved. Like I said, we have builders in my own neighborhood in the back. When we do concrete work, we have a form check every time we place forms. I'd like a little research into this in the future about making a change, working with our builder partners just to, the cost of a form check is $250 to $300 from my research today. And my suggestion would be if we implement a change, put it at the time when we do the rough end plumbing inspection. That way a form check is done before we put a green tag on the rough end plumbing, because that's the step before you put in rebar, cables, or poly and actually get ready for concrete. So that's my recommendation suggestion.
Good, thank you.
In addition, so now that we the reason we have the easement is so when we have to bring in equipment to do work, is there any indemnity that if we chip a piece of stone off of the thing that's in an area, is there any
Yes, that's the nature. That's the way this agreement or this document is structured, is that because we do have to get in there, the space has been restricted a little bit. So if there happens to be an accident that may chip the house or what have you,
Okay.
the owner and the successive owners have agreed that the city is not
Gotcha.
at fault.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any penalty from deviating from the plan or inside encroachment into an easement?
Well, we don't currently have any penalty for it. We strive to solve these issues first. Yeah, it's one of those things that hope it doesn't happen with the concept of the form survey. We're likely to avoid a lot more of these things, although we've only had 2 so far. So, yeah, no, we don't have any penalties for this.
I mean, we had to move a slab twice because it was in a utility easement. There was a survey pin issue on one of them, but the other one we had to move. It's early enough in the process where you're talking about redigging a beam, moving forms. The builder on us changed the plan to make it fit better once. And so, I mean, there's definitely something we can work with builder partners on. And like I said, it's a $250 to $300 survey cost. So.
Yes. Let me also add, John, that this process takes a little time. And by talking to the builder, I believe Bill's here. Are you JT? Yeah, okay, just okay. If you have any questions for Mr. Hahn, he's right there. But it's a time delay also because we have to bring this to the city council. And so if that shows up on a survey a day or 2 before closing, everything stops and you risk the buyer walking away. And that's, of course, that's a penalty, kind of indirect, to them right there. So, yeah, just wanted to add that just as part of the equation.
Questions or comments from council members?
Well, I'd move that we adopt the ordinance abandoning a portion of the sanitary sewer easement as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no.
Thank you.
Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Item number 5 is to consider a resolution authorizing the submittal of an application to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Community Park Grant Program for the water standpipe renovation and community event park project. We were notified today that we need to redo that grant application. I would entertain a motion to postpone that until July 26th.
I'll make a motion to postpone.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to postpone. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Item number 6, to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from agricultural A Plan Development Commercial 1 PD C1 district on approximately 15.836 acres located at 2406 Lake Road, generally located west of FM 2271 and east of Sparta Road to establish an RV park. Ms. Moore, you can talk about that for a moment. We have several people who wish to speak to it in the public hearing.
Yes, sir. Hi, everyone. You guys might remember this, a little bit of deja vu, but the applicant has changed the application slightly. So here is the general location for the property. It is located off of Lake Road or FM 439. It is west of FM 2271. Here's a zoomed in look at the application. It is developed with a mobile home park. There are about 14 mobile homes in this area. Here's the zoning for the property is currently in agricultural. The surrounding zonings are single family detached developments. Ag to the west, single family 3 to the east, and to the south are also single family 3 and planned development single family 1. All right, the applicant submitted this application. Again, it's a revised application from what was previously submitted in March. This is again for a planned development, commercial 1, to allow for the development of a commercial RV park with cabins and amenities. The property contained 15.836 acres, proposes 36 cabins. They're 1 to 3 bedroom cabins and 41 RV lease spaces. There's also offices, boat rental area, and outdoor amenities. Again, this is a reduction from the previous zoning case that requested 40 cabins and 51 RV lease spaces. For allowable land use, the proposed zoning would limit us to just the RV park with the campgrounds, using the C1 requirements for minimum areas and setback. Any other uses in the future will require an amendment to the plan development if approved. For the area, the site exceeds the minimum requirements for this commercial 1 zoning district, which is for 7,200 square feet. Again, this is a 15 acres site. Here is what the applicant is proposing. Access to the site will be from Lake Road. There will be an amenity center in the front. Cabins will be located on the east side, and the RV leaseable spaces on the west side, east side. Here is a second page because the property runs, it's very long. So there is some more at the rear end of the property. All right, so the application was reviewed to make sure that it complies with the City Code of Ordinance, Chapter 19 for RV parks. Again, it meets minimum size requirement in this area. This requires 1 acre. Density, 20 units per lot. This is equivalent to 5.75 acres, units per acre. They're proposing private streets. The minimum requirements are 20, and they're proposing a 24 two-way traffic. It's going to be hard surface, concrete or asphalt. Open space, what they're proposing exceeds the 8% requirement. And again, they're offering amenities that includes playground, picnic area, fishing pond, horseshoe, miniature golf, and a dog park. The code also requires screening, a 6-foot privacy fence. They're proposing to increase it to 8 or 10 to address some of the neighbors' concerns expressed previously at the meetings. It will be a gated access that's proposed into the area. They're proposing to connect to city, they're already on city water, but they're proposing to connect to city wastewater services in the area. The RV sites meet the minimum requirement, 1,500 square feet. Parking exceeds the requirement for 1.2 parking spaces per unit. They're proposing 2 per unit. And additionally, there are additional parking for boat parking available at the site. They're providing adequate refuse. What's required is 1 at every 300 feet. They're proposing 6 in the area. Adequate showers and restrooms. With the cabins, they are self-contained. They have restrooms in that, but for the RV parks, they're also proposing 6 facilities in the area. Here is a look at the clubhouse that is being proposed. It is over 1,800 square feet. Exterior is mostly stucco, some stone at the bottom. Composition roofing for the structure. Here's a look at the cabins. They're going to have 3 different, again, 1 to 3 bedrooms. The 1 bedroom is 273 square feet, 2 bedrooms 718, and 3 900. All of it will be made of hardy plank siding and composition roof. Future land use map identified this general area for residential use. Notices were provided to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We received 2 letters of opposition and 3 letters of support for the project. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting in June, and they voted 5-2 to disapprove the application with prejudice due to the response received from the neighbors. While this is not traditional site-built homes, the density is comparable to that of a site-built home. Staff does not take issues with the planning and zoning recommendation due to the inconsistency with the future land use map. Should council decide to approve, we do recommend the following conditions. The allowable use of the property shall conform to the commercial 1 district. In addition, a recreational vehicle park is permitted. The area should conform to all applicable type area 14 design criteria. That includes site development, building design requirements, landscaping design requirements. Signs shall conform to our adopted standards, and a subdivision plat and development plans are required. I just want to point out the applicant is here. Should you have any questions for him, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. At this time, we'll open the public hearing for those who've signed up to speak to this item. We would ask that you speak into the microphone and give us your name and address, and please limit your statement to 3 minutes. And Councilmember Lee here will kind of give you a sign about 15 seconds before that to let you know to please wrap it up. But we appreciate your consideration to our time limits. First person who signed up was Brenda Howard. Thank you, Ms. Howard.
Thank you. My name is Brenda Howard, and it's 5613 Hamlet Drive, Belton, Texas. I'm speaking for the development of a resort at Nomads, which is currently known as Shady Meadows on Lake Road. I strongly recommend approval of the rezoning. I do understand the community members had concerns about the noise, the level of clientele, and the space between their homes and the resort. All of these concerns have been addressed, and these have been shown during this presentation. I am for the resort for the following reasons. Rooftops. While it looks like there are several developers who would love to develop this land for housing, we all know that housing does not generate the same revenue for city that a business does. It is my understanding that the entire area currently proposed to be residential. And I have this really blurry but big copy of the residential use map. So if you look at that, basically all of that area should be rooftops. There's no commercial there. So according to this map, this would include Dead Fish Grill and other surrounding businesses. I cannot imagine the city removing all of these wonderful businesses just because a proposed land use map has that entire area as residential. It simply doesn't make sense to do this to the Dead Fish Grill, and it doesn't make sense that this resort shouldn't be allowed to be developed, especially since it's already grandfathered in as a mobile home park for 70 spaces. Number 2, tourism. I spoke with Commissioner Bill Schuman about RV parks, and he related the story of the RV park next to Buc-ee's. Are you familiar with that one in Temple? There's this big RV park next to Buc-ee's. He said no one wanted an RV park. It was a struggle to get it passed, but now it's a huge success, and that RV park has a waiting list. The clientele that own RV parks and boats usually have plenty of money to spend on vacations. It is apparent that Belton is experiencing a tourism travel growth, and we need to be prepared for accommodating this type of business. This business model will generate more revenue than rooftops, and quite frankly, it is in the perfect location for this type of business. I respectfully request that Mr. Sharma's rezoning be approved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. The next person to sign up is Scott Daniel.
Scott Daniel, 3206 Wildcatter. In 2015, store manager Lee Grevman grand opened the Walmart on Adams Road in Temple. At that time, Lee determined Adams Walmart was a lake store. To emphasize this point, Lee told me, if someone were to get in their car in front of the store and drive, not ever turning to the left or right, eventually they would end up in the water. This is a lake store. Back in 2015, before grand opening, Lee did several modifications to the original plan inside his store to promote this lake theme. Lee added 24 feet cooler of beer at the front entrance because he knows some people want to grab a cold beer on the way to the lake. Lee moved the bread aisle from somewhere in the middle of the store to the first aisle from after frozen food. Lee knows people will pick up hamburger meat and hot dog buns on the way to the lake, and he made it easy for them to purchase buns on the way to the meat counter. Lee moved the promotional aisle from where it was in the back of the store to the middle of the store across from cookies and crackers. Starting in May, every year, Lee fills the promo wall with isotonics, chips, beach towels, suntan lotion, and everything else you need when you go to the lake. Lee gets it. Lee's Walmart on Adams and Temple is the #1 sales volume store in this area. It exceeds the 3 HEBs and other 2 Walmarts. Lee's store runs more sales volume than HEB in Belton and Walmart in Belton. Our stores in Belton, HEB and Belton Walmart deserve to be number 1. We have an opportunity to approve a tourist destination that will draw business to our side of the dam. Business that we have never realized before, not just for our local Walmart or our HEB, but Dead Fish, Cheesy's Market, Lugie's, Bush's Chicken, Grand Avenue Theater. The list goes on and on. Every business can profit. You will be surprised what people will buy when they spend the night. Not to mention other lake-oriented business along Lake Road that could possibly open as a result of this resort destination. Similar to what we have experienced in downtown Belton along Nolan Creek, other businesses will open. This resort destination is the first domino to fall to really leverage our lake to grow hotels, retail, hotels, and restaurant trade. Retail and restaurants in Belton deserves the increase in sales. Citizens deserve a better variety of retail and restaurants. And our town as a whole deserves more reasons for citizens, students, and others to spend their money right here in town. We will all benefit from extra tax revenue earned from increased economic development.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. The next person who signed up, and please take my apologies, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, Rachel Ramser. Is that close?
Thank you. Dr. Rachel Ramasar, thank you for letting me talk. I appreciate the chance to speak on this proposal on behalf of myself, and I have some neighbors who couldn't be here tonight. I think this resort is a great idea. I just don't want it in my backyard. I'm at 1604 Sandbar, and that literally does back up onto this area. The changes that they made since the last time this was presented, which was to pull 10 RV slots, 4 cabins, and increase the fence size, really doesn't change the fact that it's still sitting in my backyard. And the backyard of a lot of the people along Twin Ridge. And additionally, the condition of the property right now just doesn't give us a lot of confidence that the owner is going to follow up on the upkeep and follow up on his assurances to be a good neighbor. Some of the plans that they mentioned at the Planning and Zoning Committee were to enforce an 8 p.m. curfew and to try not to populate the cabins next to Twin Ridge. And I just don't see stuff like that as reasonable or enforceable. So, you know, I would love to have a resort like this in Belton. I think it'd be great for the city. I just don't think the location is right. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next person to sign up, Jason Williams.
Thank you for having me. Sharma and I are partners in this project, and I think I met with you guys once before, so it won't take a long time, but I was able to walk the neighborhood and meet most all the neighbors this past weekend in 109-degree weather, which was crazy. But there's quite a few people in support of it, and there's quite a few people that aren't really aware of the size and what this thing's going to do from a tax standpoint, or, you know, every dollar spent in our resorts, $3 going to be spent in the city at a different restaurant. I do think it's the right location. Again, Dead Fish across the street. You've got the drive-through barn up the street. The thing is that Sharma has over the years gotten rid of the mobile home parks as people wanted to move out. So he didn't ever get rid of anyone, but he's got it down to only 4 mobile homes at this park. And at this point, so that we can make it an RV park, so that we don't populate it back to 32 or 70 mobile homes or whatever we're grandfathered in at. And we just feel like this is the right location, the right use. There's 3 parks around us, one in Harker Heights and 2 in Temple that have just opened, and they're getting all that tax dollar, but they're coming to Lake Belton. They're coming to Lake Belton, and we need to serve these guests. We are a destination point, and I think they deserve a nice high-end resort to come stay at. And I thank you.
Thank you for your time, sir. Number 5. Marion Taboya. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you for being here.
I'm sorry, I didn't prepare anything. It was like a last minute thing.
Would you please state your name and
My
address
name
for
is
the record?
Marian Tafoya. I live at 3000 Amber Forest Trail. I'm a board member in the Red Rock Hill community.
Thank you.
We do have one of a nicer community, and most of our, or a lot of our homes, the backyard will be attached to this park, and most of the neighbors do not want that. Yes, there are maybe some for it, but at our board meetings, a lot of them did say they did not want that. I don't think it's the right location. If it was in your backyard, attached to a campground, I don't know if you guys would want that. We sure don't. It would be nice to have something like that in Belton to bring in revenue, but not in the neighborhood. That fish grill is across the street and they don't have houses with neighbors. And I did try the park. There's more than 4 houses. We drove down it on Saturday and it's really scary looking. You guys should drive down there too. There's a lot of trash. Yeah, like abandoned homes, but there's more than 4 families living there for sure. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate you taking the time to come. Were there any more public comments? If not, we'll close the public hearing and. No, sir.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Paul Strang, 3239 Lake Park Road. I actually drove through the park this afternoon. I've lived across the street for 4 years. I didn't even know it existed. When I actually learned about this project on Facebook and thought, wow, what a great idea, man. Belton's really becoming a bit progressive, you know, and attracting this type of clientele, which I know would result in, just as this gentleman said, that new restaurants, new hotels, new businesses would sprout out. And being a business owner in Belton, I would love to see something like this. And again, I do live across the street. I didn't even know this existed. And my conclusion is I would love to see something like this versus 70 mobile homes, if that's, you know, the opposition to this. I really don't know what the opposition is, but I heard that that's a possibility. So I would really, you know, if it were for me, I would love to live across some type of a resort than low income housing, you know, just as anybody would. And even if my house backed up to it, I think that I would not want to back up to low income housing. So I would have to stand in support of something like this. I think that would be a great thing for Belton and it, you know, as a destination community.
Thank you, Mr. Strang. At this time, we will, anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I said I wasn't going to do this. My name is Delpha Potter. I live at 3532 Canyon Heights Road. The one item I have not heard anyone address is the extra traffic on 439. When you drive in either direction on 439 after you leave the Belton Park area, and you're going to turn left, you take your life in your hands 100% of the time. We addressed this before in another situation, and nothing has been done. I understand 439 is a state road, but the city does have some pull. I would think, of course, we never know, but the extra traffic that this would bring is not something that's insignificant. If you have not driven out there and start turning left from either direction, I promise you, you won't want to do it twice in a row. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Potter. One last call. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Macy Petru. I live at 3007 Amber Forest Trail in the Red Rock Hill subdivision. I'm proud of my neighborhood. I'm proud of my community. And I think that this is a terrible idea. I chose to live in an upscale neighborhood and not near a resort or near an RV park. Like I said, I'm proud of where I live. I'm proud of the Belton community and I'm proud to be a Tiger. And again, the traffic, the clientele that this could potentially bring, I think would really lower what the Belton community is coming to become. I feel that RVs belong around the lake, and recreational.gov has plenty of sites to offer that to people who choose to camp in cabins or RVs and things like that. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come. Yes, ma'am.
I'll make this short. I know y'all are crunched on time. Kirby Bailey, I live at 2603 Twin Ridge Court in Red Rock Hills. I just bought my property in April, and I chose that house specifically because it backed up to a very nice, quiet, wooded area. I agree kind of what everyone has been saying. The recreational area, being by the lake is a great idea. I don't think the location is appropriate, and I really, like I said, I chose my house based on what it backed up to, and I'd really hate to see that change. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for bringing that young man with you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Jeff Howard, 5613 Hamlet Drive, Belton. I understand the not in my backyard concept. If you look into that, they're back over their fences right now into the backyard. What do you see? You see the remnants of cheap trailer parks and everything else. We have an individual here ready to spend millions of dollars to go in and enhance that property and make something nice out of it. I live in an upscale neighborhood myself. I know what I paid for my house. I have lots of friends with RVs, and I know what they paid for those. These are not cheap little tag-along RVs are going to be in there. I mean, a fifth wheel truck to haul some of these things are 70, 80, 90, $100,000. The RVs themselves are 100, 200, 300, $400,000. That combined may be more expensive than some of the homes it's backing up to. As far as clientele, I think those are the type of clientele that we would like visiting Belton, that are going to go out and spend money. The economic impact on this, it was mentioned 3 to 1, 3 to 1 impact versus what's going to be in there with housing and stuff. We don't need to be locked in by plans. Good leaders see a plan, and when they see an opportunity, they seize it. This is an opportunity to seize. So I fully support the possibility of putting this RV resort, and not an RV park, but an RV resort here in Belton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Anyone else?
My name is Piyush Sharma. I'm the owner for this project. My address is 1060 Crescent Drive. All I want to say, this is a unique project. It's going to bring lots of employment, lots of revenue to city. More businesses going to get the benefit out of this project. And it's the unique product we have. So I think it's a location is right. The person who is doing it is there from 16 years. He knows about the property. He knows about the clientele. He knows what need to bring in a Belton. I will never bring nuisance to Belton because I'm a citizen of Belton. I respect my Belton. I respect my neighbors because my neighbors are my friend and my friends are my family. So their concern is my priority, and I will do the best from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Ann Kennedy, 3202 Breakers Cove. I am connected to that cul-de-sac that backs up to the proposed site. And just a big concern for me is right now it's pretty darn quiet, and the noise level would be an issue. I think something to consider too that we haven't really mentioned yet, but just again, I think it's a great concept, but not the right location. So just wanted my voice to be heard.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Anything different that we've not heard at this point in time? If not, then I will close the public hearing and turn it over to council for their consideration. Didn't mean to do that, but turn it over to the council for their consideration. I would remind you that it was denied with prejudice by the P and Z, which means that there has to be 6 affirmative votes to pass this item, should the council decide to do that. Questions and comments from council members?
I would comment that having been out there, not only recently, but several times in my life, and seen it there and seeing the potential to improve that and not leave it as it is with its grandfathered condition. I think it's an opportunity. I think there is justification for privacy and fencing, and I think that's been covered. I think it's a good project. I think it's good for our community, and I certainly appreciate the thoughts back and forth of its location. I think it is appropriate where it is, and I think it's a good project.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from council members?
I have a couple questions and comments. Some of my questions regarding the PD, research on this, talking to Sam this week. There's no buffer zone between commercial and residential on this, but we did that with HEB. There's a pretty prominent physical barrier there. It's my understanding that we can require any barrier we want with the PD. I appreciate the adjustment to the 8-foot, 10-foot privacy fence, screening, maybe something a little more sturdy, permanent as a physical barrier would be something I would be in favor of. One of the other questions I had is, with the PD, are we able to monitor and enforce short-term stays? If we notice what's happening longer than 30 days or anything long and short-term, what's our position there?
I would like to point out that Chapter 19, the RV park requirement, does have a limitation on how long a person can stay at an RV resort. I want to say the time limit is probably 90 days, if I remember correctly, that they can stay at the resort. How would we know that? The applicant, someone would have to inform us, unfortunately. We're not looking at every lease agreement that comes in. But that would be something that the applicant would have on their application.
No.
Sorry, the public.
Well, he's
comments.
We've closed the public hearing. Oh, this is PD question.
Gotcha.
Other comments or questions from council members?
Well, did you have any?
No, other than that, my thing is it's an increased property tax, commercial. There, from talking with Mike, there is a sales tax component to this as well on services and things sold, goods rendered, clubhouse wise, and there's also a hotel motel tax component in this with cabins. So.
Yeah, I think number one, thanks to everyone who's come to speak your piece either for or against. I know that it's can be a little nerve wracking whenever it's your property that you want to develop or it's property next to you that's being developed. I know that that's tough. And I know that it's not ever fun to have to find yourself between two good arguments because it's not two bad arguments, it's two good arguments. I believe, and I said it last time, I think this is a really good development at one stage in Belton's life, but Belton now, the lake, as Mr. Daniel actually stated, is it's a lake community, and this is central to the lake community. It's not on the outskirts, it's in the central. And so when I was growing up, go to Lake Travis, you go to Lake Belton, there would be places like this you would stay because there weren't really homes next to it. Now, when you go to Lake Travis or you go to Lake Austin, or you go to Lake Belton, it's homes, and these are big homes. So we have to consider those people that have invested both commercially, Dead Fish Grill, and those who have put in Red Rock and built there. And so it's a tough decision. That being said, we employ the planning and zoning. Many of us here used to sit on planning and zoning. That's even a tougher spot because there's still some fluidity to it. And so I'm not inclined to overturn what they have deliberated and doing. So I think it's just, for me, it's kind of that simple on this one, is to support the Planning and Zoning Commission, who's heard this now twice.
I'll add on to that. I sat on the Planning and Zoning Commission when I think this came the first time, and I actually voted for it. So I'm definitely want to just share some of my thoughts on, I hear both sides. And David, I don't know that I've heard it presented so well that it's not two bad arguments, it's two good arguments. So it's really difficult because I see the neighbor's perspective, and I, as a tourism professional myself, understand what RV, quality RV does for a community. And so it is two good arguments. I think that when I was on P&Z, my thought process was that if this was just a random developer coming into town trying to buy a piece of property and do this, that's one thing. And then I look at someone that has been a member of our community for that long, trying to improve his own property. And I've driven down in there twice. In fact, I did again last night. Looking at the spacing between the exit at Red Rock and the turn in and out of Shady Meadows, and just the quality down in there, I can't imagine that we wouldn't want something to come in that would be an improvement. I've also learned a little bit about the difficulty of developing that piece, the long skinny piece to single family housing. All those pieces come together and make it really, really difficult. And I understand not in the backyard. I also understand that sometimes if you're not, sometimes you might have to buy the property if you want it to never be in your own backyard. So I'm lean more to, just because of my tourism background and understanding the quality of the project, and the fact that I did vote for this when I was on P&Z. And I see it as an individual trying to make an improvement to the property that they've owned many, many years, and understanding what's in there now. And if we continue to tie the hands, it can be 70 more mobile homes come back in there. And I don't want to see that there. And that could happen without my understanding, that's what it's zoned for now. I think my last comment on this would be, and I probably just lost my train of thought. So, which is common. Yeah, if it comes back. Oh, I have a question. Tina, this is a zoning change. Okay, right?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
we're approving Mr. Sharma's property be zoning change to a PB
Yes, ma'am.
for this project.
Yes, ma'am.
We still have to approve a slew of things for the project, correct?
Yes,
We-
ma'am.
We wouldn't, the city staff would,
Well,
right?
they would still bring back the plan. You'd still
Subdivision
come
plan.
back to us with, or
One lot subdivision plan.
we still have the ability to require, to Daniel's point, we still have the ability to regulate and require what we would want in the PD. My second point, and I'll quit talking, or my second question is, if this particular project does not happen, what happens to the zoning?
Okay, it's currently zoned agricultural.
Right.
For them to even add additional RV, it would need to be rezoned to a mobile home.
Okay.
Before they can put in additional RV, to answer one of the questions that you brought up
Okay.
earlier. If this was to pass and they decided to do something else, they would need to approach again for another zoning change to present the new project to the city for review.
So it's not a permanent change.
It's not a permanent change. I do.
If they don't do this project.
Correct.
Correct.
The
Okay.
Zoning goes with the property, but it has to be developed in accordance with the PD and the conditions here for it to be.
Which is
developed at all.
specific to this project.
Correct.
Okay.
And that includes recommending, if you have some additional requirement for the screening, to make a recommendation for that.
Yep.
Tonight.
That could not be deferred. That would need to be now because it is a planned development district. So 8-foot fence, 10-foot fence, concrete fence, whatever, if there's some transitional elements that are the consensus of the council to add to the PD, that would need to be done now. There would be nothing else in our standard regulations that would require an upgrade of the fencing later. So any conditions associated with this project would need to be established and put into the PD at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Stephanie?
That's great. Maybe one
John?
last comment, and just have done from Planning and Zoning Commission, years there, just did a lot of research and gathered a lot of information on RV parks, which are now actually becoming housing in many instances. And so the KOA RV park that has rules and is required to abide by our standards and ordinances. If you call out there and ask if you can get a long-term stay, they'll say, sure, you can stay as long as you want, as long as you pay your monthly dues. And people have planted trees and built decks and done anything they wanted to. There's a bus stop out there now. And so my concern is that these become housing, and dependent upon the owner and how willing and hard they work to maintain short-term status, maintain everything that they promised. If it changes hands, what happens to all those promises that were made before? It's an RV park with cabins. And I think it's really important that we have continuity, especially with residential neighbors. I'm for commercial, I'm pro-tax income, I'm pro-development. But RV parks are one of the hottest things that comes before us in city council because they're profitability. They're amazingly profitable, but the standard of those seem to die off pretty quickly unless they are truly, truly maintained. I worry about traffic. I worry about maintenance, upkeep, loudness, lights. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. And unless you're paying a high dollar fee to really enjoy an upscale place, it's not really much of a resort. It's an RV park with cabins. And so I think, I don't know that the location is correct. Very, very concerned about traffic and somebody pulling in with the fifth wheel or pulling out with the fifth wheel. Sun setting, how in the world do you get in and out of there? I mean, it's difficult. And, roll your eyes or, think I'm joking, but I've been on that road and there's an awful lot of traffic. And I've called and looked at and driven RV parks. I'm very familiar with the one next to Buc-ee's. The oversight and the people they have on site for that facility are unbelievable. They're spending a lot of money on that maintenance, I know. And they're in a neighborhood right next to it. So I just worry about some of these things. And I'm pro-development and I want people to be able to do. I'm not a huge proponent of my backyard. I've voted that way my entire career. I think if you want to voice an opinion about a piece of property, you really should probably own it and control the development. It's hard to say, I like to see through the wire fence and look at the birds and the deer, and please don't take that away from me. That doesn't carry a whole lot of water. So I applaud your effort. I just don't think it's really the right fit. And I worry about long-term repercussions from a facility that might not be as well maintained, or the promises aren't kept, or if it changes hands. That's a huge issue to me. And so that's where I got my issues.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else have any other comment? Or if not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the request, excuse me, for a zoning change from agriculture to planned development, commercial 1 PDC 1 district on approximately 15.836 acres located at 2406 Lake Road, generally located west of FM 2271 and east of Sparta Road, to establish an RV park with the restrictions requested by our planning department.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the zoning change to create an RV park. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
No. I believe it's a 3-3 split, and it requires all 6 people to be unanimous. So the motion is denied.
Could I request why it was 3-3?
I voted no,
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't
I
hear
voted
you.
no.
Thank you.
and John Holmes voted.
Right, thank you.
And I know it would be a great improvement over what is there right now, but it doesn't, again, back to the land use plan, it really doesn't fit the land use plan. And there are a lot of folks who've built homes and done things on that area that really have long-term investments and concerns. I would love to see it developed, but I don't think it's the right location for what we're talking about personally. Item number 7, to receive a report on the fiscal year 2023 capital improvements program and provide input on projects and scheduling for inclusion in the FY 2023 annual budget. Mr. Rogers.
Oh, wait. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, as we go through the budget process, an important component of the fiscal year 2023 annual budget is the capital improvements program for the next 5 years. So what is a capital improvements program? It essentially just represents how we expect to develop as far as infrastructure goes over the next 5 years. Every year, we look at our CIP to see if our priorities are still being met. Some of those items we move forward, some of those items we move backwards based upon those changing priorities. And that CIP consists of these 3 things. First, we figure out what projects we envision, and then we come up with a cost estimate for that project. The big trick is then how do we fund those things over the next 5 years? And then what are the effects of operations, future budgets for that particular project? So why do we do a 5-year CIP? Well, one, we make sure that we can provide services in the future, and that kind of goes without saying. The second one is, well, these are expensive projects, and having a plan for those expenditures and how we pay for those things is a best practice in the government finance world. It also helps us implement the capital component portion of our strategic plan. So how exactly do we do this? Well, each and every year we meet with department heads, talk about what they see coming in the next 5 years to develop a list of projects. We estimate costs and try to figure out how to pay for those things. And then again, figure out if there's any significant change on operations and maintenance in future years. So we've done this for the last couple of years. We've adopted a 5-year plan. The last one was from 2022 to 2026. And then we build upon that. So some of the things that changed from that previous plan were that most of our cost estimates, we increased by 25% to help with inflation. This number came from our engineering firm. And when we were doing the TERS plan update, and they did a quick OPC on some of these projects, and they were seeing 25% cost increases. So we worked that into the costs that you see from 23 to 27. Again, some of those projects we moved forward, advanced, and some of those were postponed from the 2022 to 2026 plan. And we added some new projects to the list. There's the big equipment replacement items, those that are over $100,000, we put on the plan just so we can keep them on our radar. We added a Hubbard branch part. This would be a kind of a cost share agreement with BISD to build a park near the future Hubbard Branch Elementary School. We know about the Mount Zion Church rehab for art money. We added that project. Also, the Central Avenue Bridge replacement project, East Central of Spring Street, that bridge to cross that way. A very large project that we added to the CIP. Capitol Way extension is a new project from, I believe that extends Capitol Way from Groves to Shanklin. And then finance building renovation. Wow. That's the best project on this list, I can tell you. No, what we're doing here is when we did in the previous plan, we had about $325,000 budgeted to replace the roof at PD. And that project's done, and it costs about $130,000 or $150,000. So we have money left over in that particular project. So what we've decided to do, I'm looking at, and this is in early stages of putting it on a piece of paper, kind of design type stuff. And we may not be able to do it with the money we have, and we'll talk about it later. But we've outgrown our building in finance. If we ever plan on adding more people for utility billing functions,
We also need to dedicate some space for our court function. I'm simply out of room. And so what we can do is some actual nice renovations and gain about 4 spots for employees just by renovating the front part of the building. And hopefully we can do that for around that $150,000 price. Honestly, I don't have that information yet. It's just what we have for now. We'll bring that back later. I just wanted to add it to the CIP. The last new project we added was the College Street sewer line. That's a far out, I think 2027 project. But we need to keep our eyes on those kind of things. So here's what it looks like. Let me do this for you. So big picture is, this is the general government side. We've identified $40.2 million worth of projects over the next 5-year time frame. And these aren't necessarily nice to have, other than my building. These are things that we really need to kind of start doing and looking at. So what you're kind of looking at, the new stuff here, this equipment replacement for the fire department. That's a brush truck that's coming up in 2023. That Hubbard Branch Park is new here at $50,000. Mount Zion is there for $500,000. Let's see, the other ones I wanted to kind of point out for you. Capitol Way Extension is way out here in 2027, a $3.8 million project. And then there's those 2 other projects. Public Works has some larger items to purchase in 2024 and 2026 as well. So lots of things happening there. This $6.2 million, that's a big number there. That's the East Central Bridge replacement. Those are the numbers that we look at now for budget. You're not approving these projects that they're going to be done. This is just a plan for me and financing as we go forward to keep these things on everybody's mind. In 2023, the next fiscal year, we've got $11.8 million worth of projects planned in 2023. So all of that's great. How do we pay for these things? So I wanted to show you, we expect of the 11 million, $5 million of that is grant money we hope to obtain. We hope to get $5 million for that $6 million bridge replacement project. That's why we have that there. BDC is going to provide $1.3 million of its money for projects. And then when you're looking out, there's some large TERS contributions, thanks to the TERS board and some of their wisdom contributing to city projects. We could see, wanted to point out, maybe 2 smaller bond issuances in 2025 and 2027 of just 1.25 million. This is, again, it's just a plan. Doesn't mean that we're going to do those things or we're approving those things. It's just ways to make sure that we have money to fund those things. This little section here is kind of the change in our operations. These numbers are really just kind of wild estimates, or not wild estimates, they're estimates of, and in each of these cases, because we are replacing some projects are replacing high maintenance items, we're actually potentially saving some O&M going forward by doing these projects. That's what that's intended to show. That's the general government side. On the utility side, most of these projects are, you've seen now for a couple of years, actually. The big boy right there is that the Temple Belton wastewater treatment plant phase 2. We did increase that. That's the latest kind of cost estimate on that. Again, that's going to probably start in that mid 2023 timeline. This force main project that you see there was, I believe, a 2025 project that we accelerated to 2023 due to the importance of that project. That's most of that. I believe this is the College Street, that new project that we have, again, way out in 2027, but we can't lose sight of those things. How do we pay for utility projects? This is no real surprise here. We talked about needing to issue bonds for that wastewater treatment plant project. We could have 2 other bond issuances in 2024 and 2025, but for smaller amounts than the 2023. So in conclusion of the 5-year CIP, we have over $68 million worth of projects. 24 million of that is actually in fiscal 23. Lot of money. But we do have a lot of cash funding over the next 5 years. I wanted to point out TERS, again, very large contribution for projects potentially. City side, city would contribute maybe $7 million towards these projects.
Again, EDC grants, those sort of things. A lot of this other funding you see here, Toll Bridge Road has, I believe, $5 million worth of, or maybe $3 to $5 million worth of developer funding for that project included in the CIP. And just, we could have potentially $20 million of bonds over the next 5 years in this plan. Again, we're not approving, while we're discussing the plan tonight, you're not giving us authority to move forward on any of this stuff. All of that you'll see in the future as we go forward. This is just a planning tool. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This doesn't lock us into doing anything. This is what you just said, a planning document.
It's a planning document. That's exactly right. Over the next 5 years.
Hubbard Branch Park.
Mhm.
The resources that you noted for paying for those projects, specifically that one, is there money that came from that subdivision for parkland use or?
The developer has agreed to contribute the land. They've platted one phase of the subdivision that you see all the houses under construction right now. They've submitted a second phase of the plat. The parkland is adjacent to the road, the westernmost road as you go into the property. There was a BISD sign on that property, you might remember. We've had some discussions with them about that. The architect already has developed a plan for that site. So we're having some initial meetings with them about development of the school site. And we asked to join in that conversation so that we could collaborate on a single joint school park site,
Playground.
basically for them. They have some ideas about what they need, and we certainly want to collaborate and do that so that it's efficient for both our taxpayers.
That was my follow-up question.
50,000 is just a plug number, basically, to just have some money in there because it's going to happen sooner rather than later, because they want to have the school operational in the fall of 24.
Okay. And then Central Avenue Bridge, this is my first go at.
Sure.
2 years.
This is the project that we requested the earmark for. And so that's a big project. It's about a $6.2 million project to build a new bridge over Nolan Creek there, basically a straight alignment coming off of Central and Spring.
You said earmark for federal funding?
Federal funds,
Correct.
right. And so
We
we've
would
been in-
replace it if it was 6 million out of city. I mean,
It's certainly needed, but we would probably not use city resources for that right now. It's probably not the highest priority, other than the fact that there's a potential for earmarks. We have identified some other federal grant funds that we're looking at in case that does not come to fruition, but we've been encouraged, and as long as the earmarks remain an opportunity, we feel very good about it.
And that was originally like a bridge. I don't know. There was some funding, right, that kind of kicked that off originally when we started looking at that.
Right. We were originally looking at bridge replacement funding through TxDOT, and that has just not measured up. We just haven't been successful with that at this point in time, but
Yeah. So
these federal funds are possible.
yeah. So Daniel, so it started, there was an opportunity to seek some funding for bridge replacement. This was one that fit the bill, and we felt that we could get funding. And since then, we've just kind of kept kicking that can down the road, looking for opportunities to shore that thing up.
I was going to ask way more questions about traffic count and what it really is used for. I mean, if we were going to have to replace it, could it just be upgraded as a structural for pedestrian walkway only?
Yeah, and that's been part of the long discussion
Yeah.
is, what if it's just a pedestrian bridge with, so.
Then I won't ask.
This
all
is the
Yeah, that's-
same,
yeah.
this is the same street, same bridge replacement money that we used for the Toll Bridge Road project. And then the second iteration of that was the Central Avenue Bridge in Yeti Poke Park, which is still in consideration. That is a historic bridge. And so the resolution of that is yet to come, but still encouraged, I believe in 26 or so is the timeframe for that.
And that's purely the reason why you see it in 2023 is because of this earmark money that may be coming sooner rather than later.
Hopefully it will remain in the near future. And that downstream bridge also contributes to downtown flooding because given the location, it catches all the debris coming down the river and then it backs up toward the interstate, the access roads. So there's multiple reasons it needs to go, but it's expensive.
So thank you for doing this. It's the thing I really appreciate is that you minimize the amount of bonds required for the general fund.
Correct.
I think I'm stupid and I listen to podcasts and I read things about governance and financing and all that stuff. the trend more and more is local governments taking it on the chin for broad-based spending and borrowing at the federal level. And so because of that, the constraints on us has put more constraints on us. So I think that, having utility fund, being able to borrow for things with that, using BEDC to help on economic development for things like Capital Way, using TERS, which is incremental in it, and being able to borrow things with that. Those are things that I think are really good tools. And I hope we can not have to borrow using the general fund. I think our sales tax, just looking at that and where we are on sales tax versus what we thought we would, might help fund some of that. So hopefully we'll see. And that's some of the comments on the 5-year plan that I made, is I think we've seen I'll call it a seismic shift in appraised values, taxation, people shopping and spending and even working locally. Now they're able to work remote. And so I think we're seeing small bedroom communities see a really rise in the tax base that we've seen leached out into the larger communities. I say all that to say, I think we're going to see better financial revenues based on the current tax rates that we will hopefully not have to.
Oh, I agree.
So I thought you guys did a really good job. I would also mention, I know you put the fire truck. It would be good because you've also mentioned other fire things, and I didn't see any of that in here over the next 5 years.
Right.
And usually there's probably other things that need to be in there that may not be.
Yeah, this one, so that's exactly right. What I picked up for the CIP, because it's really capital projects.
Yep.
I picked up those very large items.
Yep.
Like I think it were over $100,000. They just didn't have, they do have this in 2023. They don't have any of those large items until further out, I think 2028, 2029. But you see Public Works down here in this towards the bottom, they do have significant purchases, and those are coming from equipment replacement fund.
When it comes to those, I would model in there, because I think our ladder truck is, how many is it, like $1 million, $2 million?
Yeah, they're $1.25 million.
$1.25 million. It would be better instead of seeing 000, $1.25 million and then 000.
Right.
It'd be good to have that kind of spread out.
Yeah, no, and that's what we're doing. This is the expenditure side.
Okay.
So we're doing exactly what you're saying in the contributions into the equipment replacement fund. This is just actually when you write a check,
This is when you buy.
and that's why you're seeing that. So yes, that's correct. We're doing exactly what you want us to do.
Okay, that's good. Okay, well,
The equipment replacement line item.
Correct.
So
I just didn't see that 1.2 anywhere in anything I
Right.
saw.
It's happening. It's happening in the regular operating budget.
Yeah.
Those contributions
Thank you.
to equipment replacement.
other questions for Mike?
How about a black screen?
Not today.
I don't think we had, do we? I don't think we have any action.
There's just no action on this one. Okay, the next item, item 8, discuss certain assumptions used in the development of fiscal year 2023 annual budget, including but not limited to health insurance premiums, sales tax, street maintenance, and employee compensation. Another no action information item, Mr. Rogers.
Again, as we keep moving towards a proposed budget that's coming your way here soon. At the last meeting, we had some discussions about the general fund. There was some discussions about some of the assumptions that we had in there. And I kind of wanted to have a follow-up with you just to kind of explain, our thoughts on leaving it where it is or changing it. So these 4 are the ones we'll talk about tonight: health insurance, sales tax, street maintenance, and then compensation. I just wanted to show you this again. This is what I showed you last time. I have not updated this with anything in this presentation. But what I'm kind of looking at as of, recently, was a $500,000 increase to fund balance in the general fund. That puts us at about 32%, which is close to the 30% that we want to maintain. But I don't have a whole lot of slack there to do things with. Just wanted to show you that. So health insurance. Because we had like a 12% increase in the previous fiscal year, or the current fiscal year, if you want to say it that way, in 22, We did not put in the proposed budget, the preliminary proposed budget, any increase in health insurance premiums. That was the wrong call. We met with our consultant last week to talk about where he thinks we're going to be for fiscal 23, and they see a 15 to 18% increase in health insurance premiums. Is what, and now this is, so we're going to do an RFP to see if we can change that. We'll also get into plan design and some other things that are going to happen after this. But for budgeting purposes, what I'm probably, what I will bring back to you is an increase in this 15% to 18% range. And so what that does to us is it increases general fund expenditures by almost 150,000. Water and sewer expenses would go up 34, and all those other funds by about 17, with a 15% increase to health insurance premiums. Like I mentioned before, we plan to do an RFP in August. City Council will see the results of that in November and approve a new plan that'll take effect in January. We're going to hope to get it down below that projected increase. We'll see. On the sales tax side, at last week's meeting, I mentioned that I plan on budgeting a 10% increase over our current year estimate. There was some debate of whether that's too high. And again, I had mentioned before, and never in my career have I budgeted a 10% increase in sales tax revenue. But things are looking good. What I wanted to show you was that our 3-year growth rate is about 16%, 3-year average growth rate from 20 to 2022. If you go back further than that, when it was more typical, our average growth rate was 2.7%. So, you know, I'm looking at 10, but even if we went back down to closer to a 3% growth rate, we would still add $150,000 of additional revenue for sales tax. And remember, I had that 500,000 in there kind of right now as net income. So if we do come in less than that assumption, the hope is that we would include enough net income or increase in reserves in the general fund to cover any of that shortfall if it were to be less than 10. This is what it looks like kind of graphically. The purple line you see there is the actual growth rate that the actual dollars in sales tax growth for each of these years. The green is the growth rate from one year to the next. And you can see these large jumps in 2021 and 22. That's that big increase that we've been seeing. That's that 3-year average, close to 16%. I'm looking at a 10%, say, for next year, which is less than the most recent 3 years, but that buys us some room if we do come in less. I'll do it this way. I mean, if we do come less, we still are going to have. I mean, I don't expect it to be like that, but we have some room there if we keep net income the way we do.
So go back.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just getting my percentages and dollars lined up.
Percentages, the percentage growth over
I'm
here.
just looking at the slash line. So we're,
Yeah. And so I'm budgeting, if I'm budgeting 10, I'm still on the upper level here. Again, as I mentioned last week, we have some headwinds in front of us and especially our construction component with mortgage rates increasing and everything else. I mean, that's 29% of our sales tax base. We could slow down some, but that's kind of why I'm at 10.
Well, even a 10% increase would put us near 7 million for the year, right? It's over 6 million.
Yeah, over 6 million. That's that number that you see here is where we would be at 10%.
All right.
On our street maintenance, we talked about that at our last meeting. The preliminary proposed budget includes that goal that we've always been talking about of getting us to $1 million in street maintenance. On top of that, we budgeted $650,000 in 22, but we deferred that street maintenance project because of the costs were so high. We were going to get much less work done for the same $650,000. So we just deferred that until fiscal 23. On top of that, we have $1.5 million in ARP money that we're talking about using for street maintenance and sidewalk maintenance.
And we also have that $1.3 million set aside for West College and 13th. So we could put out on the street a $4.5 million street maintenance package, and that will get some interest. And we should get a decent price with that sort of package going out on the road. That's the hope anyway.
Good plan.
And my comment there, Will, was with our previous budget of 650 for street maintenance and jumping to $1 million just seemed like a pretty big jump. And if we could reduce the tax rate by a penny and cut it to 850, that here seems like a stair-stepped increase. Goal is still $1 million, but maybe some ease to the taxpayer.
Yep, that's the discussion that we had last week. Certainly a plan if you want to do that. But with, and this is just my opinion, the other side of that argument is with values increasing the way they are, this is a chance for us to make this very large jump with less effect than if we have it 850 next year. I'm going to have to add another 150 to expenditures next year to get us. And I don't know what values are going to be next year. So it's just opportunity, but the proposed budget, and that's why we're having this discussion. The proposed budget, as you see, I wanted to show you that funding history exactly that you're seeing there. When we kicked this off in 2017, that's kind of what we contributed, and not all of that money came from the general fund. Some of it was more one-time money that we set aside to kind of build this pot. We were around $300,000 there in 19 and 20. We just recently increased it the last couple of years to 650, to around 650. And then this jump now that we're talking about making in 2023.
You could budget 800 there, spend the 650 from the previous year, spend 1.5 million in the ARC funds, and have a heck of a road and sidewalk program and give the taxpayers some relief. Maybe something to consider.
Any input that I gained tonight on that idea helps me with putting your proposed budget in your hands in the next couple of weeks.
And I think, it's easy to focus on this one because it's a big nugget, right? But there's a lot of things that we spend money on citywide, right? And so I think coming with a balanced approach of if there's pressure to move our tax rate down some, we need to have, here's A, B, and C, what we would look at doing. If we maintain the tax rate as it is, here's what we would recommend.
Okay.
Because and it's part of our responsibility to, when we see huge jumps in appraised values, we don't have the protection for the taxpayers like California has instituted for people who potentially could be priced out of their home. And so we've got to look at that. We can't just spot and say, well, you deserve to not have your taxes increased, but you need to pay double.
Yeah.
So we just have to look at the ceiling and the floor.
Right.
So I support John's desire to look at that.
Okay.
And we need to make an informed decision.
Correct. And that's absolutely no problem. What we would do is probably bring it like this as the proposed. And as we get into that tax rate discussion, one of those offsets that could go along with any kind of reduction in the tax rate could be this potential funding.
And Mike, remind us again, all this preliminary budget items that you presented and previously presented were based on the dollar amount just below the voter approval.
Yeah, it's right at the voter approval rate, whatever that
Okay.
voter approval rate might be.
Yeah.
59.56, I think, is kind of the rate that I'm using now, but that's not the rate we should concentrate on. It's the voter approval terminology that we need to look at. Correct. That's exactly right. Compensation assumptions we talked about a bit. Again, we're implementing that compensation study, and that costs over $1 million to do that. In the preliminary proposed budget, we have a couple of things for salary adjustments. We're, I guess the word would be initiating a cost of labor adjustment of 2%. We haven't used a cost of labor adjustment before. That's what our consultant recommends that we do to stay in the market and keep our salaries in our salaries plan in line. But we're looking at maybe a 2% cost of labor adjustment plus non-civil service employees would get could get up to a 5% merit increase. And civil service folks would get the 2% cost of labor adjustment plus their annual 2.5% step increase. So general fund expenditures go up by 454. It's important to note that the totals is what we'd be working off of. So non-civil service guys may earn around 7% more. Civil service folks could be 4.5%. Remember, they had very large increases as we implemented this comp study.
Mike, a couple of things on that. Can you?
Yes,
sort
sir.
of slide back? The thing I worry about is from my old HR days, merit of adjustment of 5%. That means, a great employee may get 7% and a mediocre employee may get 2%, and we're just trying to average 5 for all rank and file with a 2% cost of labor adjustment. So, that's 7% right out of the gate.
Yeah, so the way we do merit, the 5% that you're looking at would be the maximum merit allowed. So somebody could get anywhere between 1 and 5 for merit. And on top of that, they would get a COLA. The COLA would affect every employee.
Well, shouldn't that merit say be 3 or 3.5 for all employees and not 5?
If it's applied to all employees, it's not a merit increase. It's just everybody gets a whatever that.
But historically, you don't budget 5%, the maximum allowable for all employees.
Yeah. So typically what happens is we end up around 4, like on a typical merit, and we've had 5 merit for years. What typically happens is you'll end up actual costs around 4%, just in total, because you get some, they get 3, some they get 5, and it ends up being around 4.
So I think what he's saying is if we said 5% of the labor, and then you may end up having 3 people that have a skill set that need a 12% increase because they've done a good job and they could go across the street and do the same thing for more. Is that kind of what is that you may get higher?
No,
on 2 or
hopefully
3
we've already done that.
We have done
Our
that.
salary adjustment
Yes, we
and
did.
salary study and all that.
That's correct. Yeah, we're
I'm
taking
just
care of that part.
familiar with merit increases. You say to the department, hey, you need to average 3, 3.5, whatever that number is, and they figure it out.
Yeah, and
Great
we do.
employees get 5, mediocre employees get 1.5 or 2,
Yeah.
and you average 3. But we don't budget the maximum an
Um,
employee could get
I'm
for all.
correct. And I can make that number if you wanted it to be, if you're okay with a 5% merit, we'll go back and look historically and see
Yeah,
what that
5%
number is.
merit is the maximum, right?
No, well, 5%. Okay, so these are 2 different components. We've never done a COLA before.
No, I'm just talking about the merit.
Right.
5% merit.
So 5% merit, when we go in, we all of the department heads will do a performance review of those employees. Depending upon their rating in that deal, they are eligible to get somewhere between whatever maximum we decide, and our maximum for years, maximum has been 5%. We just recently in fiscal 22 did a 3% maximum. I think it was 22 or maybe it was 21. We did a 3% merit increase. So then you have stellar employees working their tail off. The most they could earn is a 3% pay increase, period. And that was unusual. We always have had this worked with a 5%, and then, but that doesn't mean that's what everybody's going to get. Somebody can earn somewhere between that 1 and 5. And then when you got those mediocre employees and the good employees, it'll end up averaging out to around 4 or so like.
Are you,
And I understand what John's saying. What happens is when you budget for 5%, everybody's gonna get 5. If you budget for 3%, you force a normal distribution. Where it forces.
I think okay, so that is, there's some truth to that. I agree with that.
'Cause I
That's
feel-
not how, I think we have better department heads than that.
or is that everybody is not guaranteed a merit raise at all, are they?
That's correct.
Well, and
So
there's a
some people might
performance
just get
evaluation.
The COLA?
Correct. I mean, yes, you're going to have those that want to do that, but I think we're better than that.
Yeah, I've got a really good guy that works for me. I said, take 10% out of your budget. He found a way to take 10% and do everything he needs to. I went and said, hey, take 20% of your budget. He still found a way to do everything he needed to do with an additional 10%.
Right.
I understand but I think the reality is if you want a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 5, you don't budget 5 because then there's no tension in that debate. It's
I
like,
can
it's just-
I can certainly make that change.
But the slush or fluff, whatever you want to call it. that we're
So
budgeting
is council, just in this discussion, are you comfortable with a 5% merit?
Yes.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, got it. So then it's a
And if you
budget.
do a 5, and if you just apply statistics on whatever you've seen in the past, then put the number in that'll give you your best performers get the 5 and others get the hint.
You have any idea what percentage got the maximum merit raise in the past?
Not, we can give you that information if you want.
I think it would be interesting to see, to John and David's point about what percentage of those people actually got the maximum merit raise and what percent did not. Because that is going to impact your budget as well.
That's easy. And that's just a budget change. That's easy enough to do. I appreciate that input. So moving down along with compensation. So one of the concerns from council last week was, well, gee, this 2% COLA is that really enough with inflation going the way inflation's going? And our consultant we reached out to reminded us that this is not a cost of living increase that's tied to inflation. This is a cost of labor increase. And most organizations out there, and it's her experience, that they're not matching in inflation right now because they just can't afford to do that. I mean, it's not something you can do over time. What she told us was that she is seeing 5% on average, and that's total increase, much what you were saying. So if we did that, so she recommends keeping what we're doing. So remember the numbers that we were looking at was an employee, a non-civil service employee could get up to 7. And then a civil service person could get up to 4 or would get 4.5 under that COLA plus 2 plus 5. So that stays in kind of in line with her market study.
And by when you say civil service, we've got these bands. Basically, those bands move up, right?
The
It's not-
COLA will move
right.
the bands and the salaries along
That's
with
what,
it.
yeah, that's what.
That's correct.
So, yeah.
So that's why those are two independent things. Everybody would get a COLA, not everybody would get the same merit.
Yeah, really important component of the compensation plan that she's emphasized, and I think the council recognized back in April when we implemented this, is to do everything we can to stay as close to market as we can. And so the opportunity for up to 5%, not everybody gets a 5%, but an opportunity up to 5% for the general employees, and the 2% COLA, cost of labor, I think is really important to help us maintain competitiveness in the market.
Is the cost of living the COLA, it's not is it based on the midpoint of the range?
We also the COLA. No, the COLA is going to apply to the scale. So, I mean, essentially would be what they're making plus 2%.
Okay.
It's real salary.
Regardless of what.
And and as far as merit goes, you'll recall that we used to do that COLA, that merit increase based upon the midpoint. Our consultant recommended not doing that any longer. That actually makes it upon real salary. So when you say somebody gets a 4% pay increase, it's truly a 4% pay increase. And so that's also one of those changes through implementing this.
And that COLA is suggested for all job positions, and the opening salary base rate is adjusted
Correct.
by the COLA. And for fire and police, we're adjusting all those steps by COLA too.
Correct. Yeah, they're all, and that's the reason you do that is so your scale moves up a little bit every year and you don't fall way behind over the next 3 years until you do another study. And that's that recommendation that the consultant made. So when we had that discussion, well, is 2% too much, or not enough? I just kind of wanted to show you graphically what it would look like if you decided to say do a 3% COLA instead of a 2% COLA. And that's these columns over here on the COLA, and an extra 1% COLA would cost $101,000. An extra 1% merit would cost $44,000 in the general fund. In water sewer, it's not nearly as dramatic. Remember, the reason that is the civil service folks get this. They wouldn't get that because they don't get merit increases. They get annual step increases. So just for your information, when you're having this discussion, that's how much it would cost if you wanted to change one of those by 1%.
So right now, the total percent is 120,000 combined. Is that the total? That's okay. COLA already is multiple percentages. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand how the same budget with 1% would be different.
You would subtract that. If you said 1% COLA instead of 2, you'd subtract 116,000 and say from our entire budget.
Okay, yeah, okay. So what I'm trying to do is equate what John was saying. If we're saying, okay, 5% merit, so 5% merit means $300,000.
Okay, so if we said, if I
60,000
change,
times 5.
if I change my budget to 4, that's your change.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Budget.
So the total, but what I was doing, I just jumped for it. So 5% times those two add up to 60,000 times 5 is 300,000. So if we went to 3.5%, then we pull $150,000, $200,000 off the budget. Yeah. Okay.
Normal budget to me. Is not that high.
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay, so our recommendations, and I'll modify this, keeping our 15% health insurance premiums. Again, hoping that we'll come in at 15. I don't know what that number is going to be until after the budget's already adopted. But that's the low end of his projection right now. Sales tax revenue, I think we can leave at 10%. Again, I'd be hesitant to just keep adding on and pushing sales tax revenue, knowing that we have such a large component of our sales tax base is construction based. And with everything interest rate wise and cost wise for housing and things like that, I think there's some headwinds to be had there. But we do have, as long as we don't decide to take all of the surplus and just wipe it out with more expenses or whatever, or lower tax rate or whatever, we need to have some cushion by that 10% in case that doesn't come in. Street maintenance, again, the proposed budget will likely have this $1 million in it. We can certainly use that, build upon that, and have that discussion at a future date as to should it be 850 and you have that $150,000 savings there. That's an easy thing to do. And then cost of labor, what I'll do is change the budget to a 4%. I'll find out what our real percentage has been, and I will change our personnel calculator to include what that average rate is for a merit. But what I'm hearing council said fairly loudly is that you're okay with a 5% merit and a 2% COLA as far as the plan goes. Okay. And we've kind of done this as we've gone along, and I appreciate your feedback. I really do. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it very much. Item number 9, hold a work session to discuss short-term rentals in the city of Belton. Bob, and no action will be required after the work session.
Thank you very much. You guys are holding up okay. All right.
Most of us.
Most of you, okay.
What was the question?
Dozed off for a second.
Kidding.
You just answered.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
It was a joke.
I'm not leaving.
I know.
He's going for a snack.
Thanks.
This might be a good time to do that. Get your energy up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, folks, let me go ahead and get started, just in the interest of time. So our goal today is to talk about short-term rentals. And we'll also speak a little bit about the problems that we experience and that we've received via complaints. We'll talk about existing conditions as we know them, and I'm going to present some options that we can talk about as we go. And I'm asking for the council's input to the degree of how we want to approach the regulation. And we kind of imagine that there's a continuum of doing, leaving things the way they are or pushing them out to the other side. So just very briefly about what we've experienced earlier this year, we received a couple of complaints about short-term rentals, 2 by email, and I think we had a gentleman come talk to us at the council meeting back in April. And these concerns revolved around things that the gentleman at the council meeting mentioned was over parking or maybe parking of RVs and things like that, some traffic congestion, strangers in the neighborhood, safety, and trash accumulation. And all the locations that we talked about or that were presented to us were all in residential areas. And since that time, we've been looking into this short-term rentals and have found that there are generally some things that other communities are doing. So generally speaking, a definition of a short-term rental includes a family home, bed and breakfast, tourist homes, boarding houses, single-family homes. And, they are becoming or have been since several decades, have been a very popular alternative to maybe some formal hotel areas, like bed and breakfast and things like that. And these things have been generated by the success of the platforms, such as Airbnb and VRBO, because they promote these venues throughout the entire world. You may remember that they were doing some things in the Ukraine as the people were fleeing from the Russians at the time. Anyway, there really doesn't appear to be any kind of uniform definition of an Airbnb, and I'll just use that as a term because it's kind of synonymous with short-term rentals, which is more of a generic term. So in researching this, I found a definition in USA Today back from 2020. The terms Airbnb and bed and breakfast are used interchangeably by guests when they talk about them in general. So generally speaking, an Airbnb is what the article refers to as a lightly regulated home sharing site that lets almost anyone list accommodations for rent. And the B&B is more in what we're familiar with in terms of our own requirements, and then the laws relating to lodging and things like that. So in our zoning ordinance, we have a definition for a tourist home or a bed and breakfast, and it's a dwelling occupied as a permanent residence by an owner or a renter, which serves breakfast and in which sleeping accommodations, no more than 5 rooms are provided or offered for transient guests for compensation. That's out of our zoning ordinance. And then we have another one for boarding house, and that's a dwelling other than a hotel where for compensation and by prearrangement for definite periods of meals and meals are provided, or lodging and meals are provided for 3 persons or more, but not exceeding 20 on a weekly or monthly basis. And that's it. That's kind of important because the per person that can stay longer than 30 days is typically exempt from hotel occupancy.
Do we currently have any that meet that boarding house?
We do. I think we have one, more of a bed and breakfast. It's the Bryn.
Right, that's
house,
more
that
of a
kind of
bed and
thing.
breakfast to
Yeah,
me, but
right.
we don't have any quote boarding houses that
I
fit
don't-
that definition at this point in time, do we?
I don't think so. I haven't found any of them. So I'm going to tell you no. And so facilities that are marketed by Airbnb or VRBO are considered a boarding house and a tourist home, according to our zoning ordinance. So we think that they fit nicely in our zoning ordinance. But there's some, the main difference, of course, is that with the Airbnb or short-term rental, however we decide to define it, the house does not typically have an owner or a manager on site to take care of their guests. Our zoning ordinance also talks about bed and breakfasts and tourist homes. And it talks about requiring an SUP in residential districts. But we really don't have a definition of a short-term rental. And I think that may provide us with some challenges as we go through the process, because I think we, as one of the suggestions that I'm going to make is that we explore that definition and then maybe wrap these existing definitions into that. We also have to talk a little bit about our other ordinances that deal with taxation, and we're talking about what a hotel is and what it does. The term shall include hotel, motel, tourist homes, houses or courts. It actually is loading houses, not lodging houses. Inns, rooms, houses, and other facilities where rooms or sleeping facilities or spaces are furnished for consideration. The definition has been on the book since 1985, interestingly enough. That's from our taxation code here in in the city. So the state, obviously, I just want to share these also because the state covers these things. And it also has a definition of a hotel, and it really also talks about including a short-term rental. And they define it at the bottom of the screen there, means a rental of all or part of a residential property to a person who is not a permanent resident. So we're suggesting that, short-term rentals, by definition, need to pay our hotel occupancy taxes, which other than, Bryn Oaks, none of them do. None of them do. And so we're talking about, we'll touch on the existing conditions just very
Wait,
briefly.
Rob,
After looking at the
Can you
websites.
take a second?
Sorry.
You say that none of them do. That's simply because we're not collecting it.
Correct.
That
Correct.
could be fixed.
I think so. So I think we have about 19 short-term rentals in Belton, whether they're marketed by VRBO or Airbnb. And I just have some pictures of their
So the
websites.
mechanism for that, do we just contact Airbnb and VRBO and those places and say these, you have to collect these taxes, and they collect them and send them to us, just like Amazon does when I buy my little package?
Depends on the amount of regulation that we want to employ. That could be a component of the regulatory aspect, making them aware of it, informing them of that. But yeah, needs to be some process where we make them aware of what that requirement is and start collecting it. That's not fair to the hotels for those folks to be getting by without paying those occupancy
Well,
taxes.
I don't know why they are. I mean, when I was doing tourism here, it was Christy that was still here. We'd reach out when they weren't paying, and certainly when they weren't paying what we knew they should be paying. So that may be a discussion for another time, but they should be paying. There's no excuse for that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Airbnb automatically collects it for Bell County. You can see that when you go into a listing that's outside the city. It doesn't list anything on inside the city for our sales tax or our rental tax.
There's some things called voluntary collection agreements that you can have with the platforms, and basically they collect and remit the payments. That's what they do for the state. And so they could do that for us too, rather than for the county as well. Rather than depending on the operator or the host of the facility. So anyway, these are pictures of the website. Y'all are pretty familiar with those, I'm sure. And so we have pictures of Airbnb website. And by the way, I think I mentioned this earlier, you can do this anywhere in the world and you can find a place. I have family in Holland, so I decided that, I'm going to look in Holland and see what Holland across the pond, not just. down
I
the
can't
road.
remember which meeting we were in that somebody was saying we don't have any or something like that. And I pulled it up and it's like, I see 8 right here. I see 8. It's like, I don't know why you say we don't have any.
Right. And so this number is important as we get closer to the end of the presentation, kind of talk about this. So we surveyed a number of towns in Texas. And I also wanted to mention that Clean Down the Road is going through the process of developing their ordinance. They're getting close. I checked on that today, and I don't think they've actually finished the process yet. So based on the structure of our ordinances and review of other ordinances adopted around the area, I think some of the following conditions may apply. And I want to discuss these things with you, and hopefully you can give us some guidance on these things. So I think we have 2 main ways of looking at this thing, or 3 if you want to include both of them at the same time. The first is zoning. We don't really have a clear definition of a short-term rental. And I think after our conversations with the RV parks, we get more to those, that we might have to consider adding those into the definition. And then from a location standpoint, from a geography standpoint, we may have to think about, well, do we want SUPs or other regulatory tools to determine where and how we allow these things to operate? And then the other aspect of it is licensing, and licensing is very common in other towns. As a matter of fact, that seems to be the main focus of the STR ordinances, and that's to create a license that brings them into the system, that we know where they are, we know who's operating them, who owns the property, that kind of thing. And then we have some health and safety issues that we can write into these ordinances in terms of parking requirements, trash bins, who to talk to, signage, and then, requiring that hotel occupancy taxes, that kind of thing. And so some of those are some of the requirements that may be associated with the licensing requirements. And then the last part of the licensing is maybe talk about the existing SDRs, for instance. And so I put down some thoughts on paper for you to think about. And, we have 19 of them. And well, I guess, yeah, about 19 of them. And so if we were to decide, well, let's have them, or many of them have an SUP as we go forward, then obviously that's a logistical challenge to get them all to comply. Those that don't, we need to, consider that. I'm not saying those things to dissuade you from thinking in that regard. I just want you to, kind of think about the logistics there. Or you might say there's some grandfathering opportunities for the existing ones, and the new ones that come forward will need to go through the process. Those are kind of the things that we were thinking about in terms of the scope of the potential regulations. And of course, needless to say, all new STRs will have to come into compliance with any kind of rules that we decide, or any kind of licensing ordinances that we decide to come up with. So as I mentioned earlier on, I just want to have a brief conversation with you, get your feedback, some guidance on where we need to go. And so happy to start that conversation.
I know you've done some research on this. Based on the complaints that I had from one neighborhood, they're not going to be happy with anything we do, unfortunately. I'm concerned about drafting an ordinance that gives us some pretty strong controls over where those are located, but I know there's some legal issues that are going to complicate that.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I think the reason we have Uber and the reason we have VRBO and the reason we have this is because there are certain areas that it's just hard to get a service, right? It's like Austin, you can't get a taxi, and then Uber showed up and now you can get a taxi. And some places, Waco, you couldn't get a room, and now VRBO and Airbnb, now you can get a room. So I've been thinking about that because I know people who rent from these in Belton. I know people who own these in Belton. And I think SUP is not in step with enforcement. I mean, they don't have to come down and get a building permit. They don't have to go through planning and zoning. They can just upload a thing to a website, and then tomorrow it's renting. So I think a license is the right way to do it, because if you do a license, if they violate any of the small print, you revoke the license. And part of this is fee structure that you then put a lien against them, and you start giving them a $200 a day penalty for doing something. And if they get in compliance, you can waive that. And so I think licensing is probably the right way to do it, because that's something that you can actually enforce, where I don't think SUPs we could ever, we're not fast enough and nimble enough in a digital age to do that. But, and also licensing, if I don't know, if I decided, hey, I'm going to go, it's too hot, it's too dang hot, I'm going to skip Belton for a month, I'm going to dial into this meeting, and I'm just going to rent my place out, right? If I had to do SUP, I can't do that. But, we'll work out the licensing later. I'll make sure I pay all my fees. So I think, anyway, so that's my 2 cents. Licensing, that way with licensing, you could put things like notify all the houses within 100 feet that, hey, this place has submitted a license for a thing, right? Or there's things you could do with licensing.
I mean, it's the same goes for a beer and wine license. I mean, you have to notify X number of people, schools, whatever, that are in certain range, and they have the ability to protest and say their piece. And they agree, and I agree with the license. The SUP doesn't, they would have to come for a P&Z and council and correct to get a SUP, or no? Yeah, that's like, you're talking about having we'd have to sit here and approve every single Airbnb.
If we had an SUP, we had tons of non-conforming
And
uses out there.
I don't want to make it hard and cumbersome on staff or council, P&Z, anybody of the works. And I think the license is a streamlined, clear-cut process. I think for existing, you just send the license out and say you have X number of months grandfathered in at your whatever date, whether it be the first day, January 1 or 2nd, whenever we're open. the next time that whatever
Well,
cycle.
Or just
is-
send them and say, you're required to operate under the license. We assume you agree to the terms
Yeah.
of this license. We will be collecting fees as of the date of your receipt of this letter, right? And you have between now and the end of the year to come into compliance.
And I think it's a quick and easy way to do the license. I mean, you found all the Airbnbs. I don't know how long it took. It might be a simple, every month somebody sits down and finds all the Airbnbs and, hey, this one's not on our approved license list, send a packet out or send somebody by or whatever it would take, to check it out. And then when it comes to ordinances and things like that, it's like David said, it's a clear cut way that they know they abide by the same ordinances. If they don't have enough parking for what they're trying to do, that you heard it today. We're a lake community.
Revoke the license.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you didn't play.
Yeah, we're a lake
rules.
community. We're tourism. This is commercial. This is what everybody in the room wanted earlier. So find a way to make it happen. And
It's ironic that we're turning RVs into permanent residences and permanent homes into temporary rentals.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
think-
what kind of world are we living in?
I think I'm finding it really interesting, this discussion, considering what we discussed earlier. So, everybody on Red Rock now can just have an Airbnb.
Yeah,
Great.
but the thing
So-
that we didn't discuss, and because it's not real fair, and John brought it up, most of those will be short-term, not short-term, they will be long-term, low-income housing in what's supposed to be a resort. That's what ends up happening with the
Well,
RVs and the
that's
cabins.
probably a discussion for a later time.
Well, I know you brought it up, so I just.
I think we're
thought-
making some assumptions about somebody and their behavior that I'm not sure we should be doing as a council, but
No, it's just,
um,
you're right.
but I think that this is certainly a direction we need to go. I think the licensing is the way to go. We need, all of our hotel motel facilities need to be paying their tax. I'd love to see who's not now and love to have a discussion about how we might do that. That's not fair. I think this is a trend for the future. I think it's interesting that anybody can just pop up and rent out their house when we've had that really painful discussion earlier about what we have decided what needs to go where. We've spent all this time on the future land use map. This is what we want in these areas. And now we're really easily saying you can also rent it out to whoever.
We're not easily saying, we're saying that there needs to be a process that's governed right now.
But we're
there is no
allowing
process.
it.
Well, it's gonna happen.
Well, I agree. I just think that kind of goes back to the earlier discussion.
Which we weren't going to discuss.
Absolutely not. You made it clear.
Needless to say, the commercial platforms are easy to monitor. I don't want staff spending time finding who's renting a room for cash or check and it's not listed commercially. It's a waste of everybody's time. If somebody's saying, well, they're renting a room, they need to be using probably a commercial service to make it really truly commercial and worth us, because if they're not violating ordinances or codes, if it was a habitual, there's 8 cars, it's the same 8 cars every weekend. They're on vacation every weekend, they have a lake house and somebody rents their house that would probably fall along the lines of a license, but keep it to the ones we know we can find and just try to drive that home. I think that'll set the table. I would also say that if one of these is in my neighborhood and my neighborhood clearly has restrictions and covenants against it. And so any license that comes in, if they are in an HOA, we need to defer that license to the HOA first, because we don't want to get in a position where we approve a license, but the HOA says you can't. And then we're stuck in this. Well, the city said it's okay. Well, my HOA says can. Now we're just.
Uh, That's pretty challenging. We can't enforce restrictive covenants. We can certainly.
Correct. But
ask
we can,
and-
if a license goes to HOA and they say, no, we have covenants restriction that can't do it, we don't have to approve the license.
Right.
Well, that can be just part of how, when we put the policy together on how we issue licenses, that's just part of the thing is
HOAs have in theory more power than we do in certain regards. So I'm going to use that power to our advantage.
So Bob, are you asking tonight for guidance on the direction forward? For instance, we will develop a definition, we will develop licensing procedures, we will still
Yes.
develop what that looks like, what that
Mhm.
includes.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that's what you're asking. Is that the direction?
Yes, ma'am. So what I'm hearing is that, we're not going to really, touch on the zoning. We just kind of leave it be. We're going to focus on the licensing
think
for
that
these
that's the way to
facilities
go.
and we'll craft an ordinance that we'll hopefully meet y'all's expectation, bring it back to you. And
Have a question.
yes, ma'am.
Bob.
Yes, sir.
Short term, is there a definition of how many days that is? And the reason I'm asking is when we lived on College Street for 44 years, we moved last year. It was almost annually while our children were growing up that we had college students living with us per semester. Some paid a tiny little bit of rental and some didn't. Where do we cross a line from a short-term rental in regard to numbers of days and that sort of thing? And is that something that would need to be discussed, because we have a college community where people do rent properties and rooms in their homes to college students?
Yeah, the immediate answer well, the simple answer is 30 days.
Okay.
The other side of that is there's some, I would say, common sense in terms of, are you running a, bed and breakfast or some kind of lodging facility or anything like that? And, that would be, based on that answer, we would have to proceed from there. But yeah, I don't think we're, faced with a situation we need to worry about. Tonight.
I would say this would be the commercial, using a commercial platform to acquire a commercial service is kind of what
I
I think what we're after,
Yeah.
not the Dan Kirkleys who open their home to
Right.
needy college kids. and-
Roommate situation. I mean, I think that's a whole different.
Yeah.
area.
If you're still
Using a
residing
commercial
there,
platforms for the commercial service is
Yeah.
what we're after.
Yeah.
if it's still your personal residence and you're still residing there, you certainly can have someone stay there. I think what's gotten the people coming in is a home in a neighborhood. The owners of the home are not there. And it's just a rental basically. And so it's.
Well, honestly, the owner of the home is not for residence, it's for investment property.
Right. Exactly.
And we allow that without regulation
Mhm.
if they're just wanting to rent their house
Sure,
out.
sure.
Long-term.
Absolutely.
31 plus days.
And so that's where the property rights issues come in. And we can't get too tough on regulating the situation. I think John's advised us in that direction, basically. But if it's just going to be a licensing, what are the parameters and the conditions? Extra trash cans. One of the key ones that came up was a contact person for that location in case there is trouble. Somebody, a name, a person local that police or whoever can get in contact with if there's some kind of an issue. For the protection of the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
They see stuff going on, boats all arriving. It's a tournament weekend basically. Judy's brought some folks into town basically, and they're all staying in these homes, and so it's just trying to find that balance of regulation and protection so that everybody kind of knows what's going on and what's allowed.
And Airbnb has just come out with a regulation that forbids parties, which is what happened down in the State Drive neighborhood. But the licensing procedure is going to have to be able to cover those issues and get public input before we could do that. But I think everybody here has said
Yeah.
licensing is the way we'd like to explore.
Well, and to your code, to our fee structure, like if the police or the fire have to go to so many whatever false alarms or something, there's a fee to it, right? So you just put that kind of stuff in this licensing, that anything that might happen that may be a problem, that we put that in there, and there's an incentive to self-regulate, because we don't want to have the city be Airbnb police.
Thank you.
You got a general direction to pursue with the licensing? Is that?
Yes, sir. Very good. Thank you
Give you
very
some
much. I
ideas.
really appreciate your feedback.
Thank you for your research on the issue.
Covington don't rent long-short, Covington and Vista, they don't rent short months anyway.
On occasion, if they've got an open spot, if it's got an open spot and they're selling a house and you need to place this rent for a month, but it's rare.
Okay, we're going to adjourn the regular council session and reconvene in the executive session. Do we need a short break or are we ready to go?
I'm fine. Unless you need a break.
So